And so the busy month of videos in this series continues. Welcome back to 10 years later. You guys should know by now this is the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting, be it for good or bad reasons. And as you can tell by the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2010 Maroon 5 album, Hands All Over. I don't think I need to introduce Maroon 5 to you guys. You probably know them good and well. They are a popular pop rock band from Los Angeles, California. I personally grew up with a lot of their early hits, from This Love to She Will Be Loved to Makes Me Wonder, and of course they have continued to drop big song after big song for the better part of the last decade. It's kind of weird how consistently these guys have been dropping hits, because for some reason I feel like there was a stretch of time where it seemed like they disappeared but suddenly came back and started putting out big singles again. Perhaps that's because there were rumors coming into the 2010s that the group would possibly disband after this album, but if I'm not crazy and such a stretch of absence for Maroon 5 did happen, this album was a big return for the group, as it sported huge singles like Misery and eventually the gigantic Billboard Hot 100 #1 single Moves Like Jagger with Christina Aguilera, a song that originally didn't even make it to the original release of the album but was added on the re-release a bit later. And while I'm not a gigantic Maroon 5 fan, I was interested going into this album, because the way I see it, Maroon 5 is a very polarizing group. Most music critics I see on here and most big music fans detest the group and think their music is total garbage, but given that they continue to chart so well, there seems to be an audience for them. Also, I've seen a number of people say that this album was almost the beginning of the group's downfall in terms of quality, so I kind of wanted to see that for myself. The version of the album that I listened to was 13 tracks and 43 minutes because I'm sorry, but I did not want to listen to the deluxe edition of this album. And that's not too bad in terms of length, though I would have liked it if this album was a little bit more consistent, because if there's one thing that I learned from listening to this album, it's that I don't think Maroon 5 is an albums band. They're definitely far more of a singles band. Every once in a while, Maroon 5 knows how to craft a pretty catchy track. For example, the opening song Misery. As I mentioned, that was a huge single and I did like it quite a bit when I was younger. It's still been one of the few Maroon 5 songs I've genuinely enjoyed. It's a very sprightly, bouncy jam with some catchy vocals from Adam Levine, and it's just a nice piece of early 2010s pop. It's not like it's one of the greatest things I've ever heard, but I can definitely see why this one became a hit. Also, Give a Little Love is a solid single too. The vocal melodies feel twisty and fun, and I like the pleasantly old school vibe of the song. It's a very nice head noddy listen, and I do quite enjoy it, just as I enjoy the track Never Gonna Leave You Again, a song that's a bit more gentle and more ballad driven than many of the other songs on here, but it's got a very solid chorus, sweet vocals from Adam, and decent themes of staying with someone you love. I do think Maroon 5 can have some success when they go for these kind of lighter, almost ballad-like songs, and this track is another example of that. I also surprisingly enjoyed I Can't Lie, as yes, it's a bit of a standard pop tune, but it does feel a bit reminiscent of some of the group's older material, and I do think that the bouncy grooves on the instrumental work well here, as do Adam's nice vocals even as he jumps a bit into his higher register. And the title track, Hands All Over, also feels like some of the group's older material and works in how it leans a bit more into the rock sound with harder guitar riffs. It's a solid jam with smooth vocals and a somewhat danceable vibe to it. It's been said a lot that usually if you name your album after a certain track, that track better be good, and fortunately, this one is. Also, Runaway is a rather sweet song. The instrumental is nothing you haven't heard before. It's safe and radio friendly, but there's a few solid guitar grooves on it, and the chorus is definitely catchier than it has any right to be. It's not much more than a cute pop song, but it's memorable enough, I would say. And I was also surprised returning to Moves Like Jagger, because I remember a time where that song was the bane of my existence, but listening to it now, it's actually a decent bop. It's stupidly catchy, far more than it really should be. The chorus is intoxicating, and I think that Adam Levine and Christina Aguilera have some decent vocal chemistry on the song. I'm honestly blown away saying that I like the song, because 10 years ago I probably would have never admitted that, but yeah, I kinda do. Unfortunately, just as often as Maroon 5 comes through with something fun, they also come through with something that's blatantly forgettable, and there are a lot of blatantly forgettable tracks on this album. Stutter, for example, is this throbbing song with a bright vibe that almost sounds like the group trying to make a more pumping Shania Twain song. That's just the comparison that I made when I heard it. Yeah, Adam's vocals sound kind of sweet, but the melodies are just boring, and it just feels like a purely disposable track. Don't Know Nothing is also pretty forgettable too. It's the kind of song that has some potential with a decent bass groove and some solid vocals, but the chorus is just clumsy and it kills the momentum for me. It's a shame because I actually do like the instrumentals here, but it's a track that definitely could have gone back to the drawing board. How is a song that's not too bad, but while the chorus is relatively catchy, I do think the song itself is a bit too glitzy C for me. It plays it very safe and doesn't really have enough of a hook or exciting factor to make it stand out against anything else on here. Get Back in My Life is also an easy skip for me, even if it goes for a bit more of a danceable, groovy feel. The chorus here just doesn't click for me, and while Adam's vocals do sound good, it's one of those songs that just feels loud yet empty and doesn't really do all that much for me. Just the Feeling is a decent attempt at another ballad, but in this case, it doesn't work as well as some of the group's other lighter singles. Part of me feels like it's because the instrumental lacks a hook and just feels so bland and cleaned up compared to some of the other lighter songs the group's put out, to the point where it leaves very little of an impact. Sure, Adam sounds solid as usual here, and I'm sure the song had good intentions behind it, but it's just extremely bland. And also the track Out of Goodbyes featuring Lady Antebellum is a pretty disappointing closer to the standard edition of the album. It's a more country twinge song that unfortunately does literally nothing to stand out for me. It's rather bland, and while the vocal chemistry is decent, the song feels like it goes on for way too long. Overall, I will say that revisiting this Maroon 5 album could have gone a whole lot worse. As it is though, the album was just fine for me. It was mostly just pop music that was decent at best and forgettable at worst. It didn't outwardly frustrate me like some of the group's other music, and the biggest singles from this album still hit to this day, but there's really not much else I could say about the album other than that it's just there. It's not nearly consistent enough, a lot of it is very unexciting, and as I said earlier, I think it's one of those records that proves to me that Maroon 5 is not exactly an albums band. They're more of a singles band. Every once in a while they come through with a catchy single, and the group knows how to play into pop conventions well enough to score a hit every now and then, but other than that, their style doesn't translate as well to albums as it does to the occasional single. You could definitely do worse, and trust me, Maroon 5 has, but you could also do way, way better. And even as someone who's not a super fan of the group, I'm sure they have done way better. Back in 2010, I'm not sure how I would have felt about this album, given that it was released at a time where I really wasn't caring all that much for pop music. I can't imagine this record would have gotten me all that excited. And listening to it now, I can't say I didn't like it, but I also can't say I feel like I was missing all that much back in the day. If I had to rate it, it would probably get an okay on my scale. It's not horrible, it's not special. There's a few decent tracks on the album, but nothing to get all that excited about. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back when it came out? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it then, hate it then, love it now, hate it now? And what are your overall thoughts on Maroon 5? Whatever they are, leave them down in the comment section. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you, but if not, it's no big deal. I won't beg you for it. In terms of what's coming up, the next album that I'm going to be talking about in this series is Lil Wayne's I Am Not a Human Being. I don't really have much familiarity with that album, but I am definitely interested in checking it out, so stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.